COVID-19, March 13th, 2020. Chaos and division equals power acquisition. COVID was a biological chemical attack. It was going to be used with Hillary as president. They created a problem they already had a solution to. When you know Bush Jr. wrote presidential directives for federal continuity, and, even more damning, when you apply that Obama wrote an executive order in 2009 that specifically says, establishing federal capability for the timely provision of medical countermeasures following a biological attack. Along with mainstream news sources, Bill Gates talking about pandemics and vaccines in 2012, it's very easy to see what was going to happen. How it happened is what you need to understand. The military and world alliance of generals gave all the Washington establishment via Congress the chance to do what was right for humanity. But they didn't. They had their rats in Ukraine relinquish these attacks. It wasn't China. There's multiple cities in Ukraine where biochemical labs are, those that Russia's bombing, with the name China attached to the Ukrainian spelling. It all ties in and makes sense when you apply the timelines and facts. On March 13th, 2020, Trump declared a nationwide emergency under the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, authorizing assistance administered by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, the first known instance of FEMA serving in such a role for a public health incident. So, Russia is just annihilating and bombing Ukraine for no reason, or just because they want their land back? And that requires this kind of list from your taxpayer money? It doesn't make sense. Instead, if you flip the scenario and apply the facts, it makes plenty sense. Obama wrote 3 executive orders for Ukraine in 2014. VP Biden made 7 trips in 7 months to Ukraine in 2014. In 2014, there was not a traditional election held in March. It was called a snap election, when Poroshenko won the first round and there wasn't a second. Obama congratulated him 2 days after that election. Ukraine broke the CIS treaty in 2018 with Russia. Putin hands the soccer ball to Commander-in-Chief Trump in 2018. Russia doesn't participate in the World Cup 2022? Not participating in one of their most loved sports? The soccer ball represents the ball is in your court, Mr. President. You tell me what you want me to do. Commander-in-Chief Trump never started any wars. He got Russia to bomb these Nazi-ran biochemical labs. The only Ukrainians fighting in Russia are Nazi soldiers, defending these biochemical labs that the United States criminals were funding. Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, John Kerry, Mitt Romney, and the list goes on. Hunter Biden is now under serious investigation. Pause for 1 second and realize that the majority of what you see coming from the mainstream is actually military controlled. The same time Hunter is being investigated is the same time Trump is being indicted, which is the perfect setup for all red pills to fall like rain at the same time. Luckily, COVID wasn't as bad, as they've skewed the numbers, and the majority of those vaccines were saline. The military knew what was going on and did everything to prevent as much as they could. The rest of it is to wake us up. It wasn't fun for anyone. This is war, and it's up to you to understand who's who and the blueprint. Just think back to friends and family members who are so distant from your point of view, that are now getting closer to it by simply observing the sheer fuckery of the last 2 years. The Fed submitted, March 15th, 2020. During COVID, the Federal Reserve took a back seat to the Trump-controlled Treasury Department for the first time in 100 years. The Fed submitted and paid out all liquidity while our Treasury secured the assets. It used to be the other way around. Fast forward to a glimpse of today and the Federal Reserve has gone bankrupt. New financial systems are being created, the dollar is failing and will die fairly soon.
Here's the G7, a group of 7 of the world's advanced economies, including the US, UK, and Japan. And here's what some call the alternative from the developing world, the BRICS, formed by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The BRICS is trying to position itself as the voice for emerging economies and challenge Western dominance of global affairs. Its leaders are holding a summit in Johannesburg to discuss an historic expansion. More than 40 countries, including Saudi Arabia and Iran, want to join.
The expansion of BRICS could definitely boost the group's global influence.
Let's look at what a potential enlargement means for the alliance and its ambitions to shake up the global political and economic order.
The original term BRIC was actually coined by a Goldman Sachs banker, grouping these really different countries together because they were so fast growing.
The leaders of Brazil, Russia, India, and China formalized their relationship in 2009 and invited South Africa to join the alliance a year later.
They decided to take that idea in an effort to create a bit of a political and economic counterpoint to what's perceived as the Western hegemony of the global political and economic spheres.
The BRICS countries together make up more than 40% of the world's population and almost a third of the world's GDP. According to data from the International Monetary Fund, the bloc has already overtaken the G7 nations' share of the global economy on the basis of purchasing power parity. That's where the purchasing power of different currencies is equalized. Projections by Goldman Sachs show the world's economic balance shifting towards the BRICS and emerging economies. China is expected to overtake the US as the world's largest economy by 2050, with India climbing to number 3.
China and India have experienced massive growth since the BRICS were founded in 2009 and certainly have helped them swell in importance and remain relevant on the global stage.
China and Russia are pushing to enlarge BRICS. Experts say Beijing is keen to create an alternative grouping to counter the US and the West on the world stage.
China has been bullish on expanding BRICS for some time, and they're particularly keen at the moment because of the trade tensions with the US looking to diversify its supply chains away from China.
Russia sees an expansion as a way to gain more international allies following its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. South Africa publicly supports the expansion, as does Brazil. But experts say behind the scenes, Brazil and India want a more measured approach.
It seems that they are concerned about the group leaning too autocratic. So they want to have very specific requirements for admission to make sure that there's a balance amongst the members and that it doesn't become sort of the autocratic G7.
More than 20 countries have formally applied to become part of BRICS, ranging from Saudi Arabia to Ethiopia, Argentina, and Indonesia. Experts say Saudi Arabia is a strong candidate as a major economic and energy power in the Middle East with a growing role in regional diplomacy. Indonesia, with the world's 4th largest population, is another strong contender.
Indonesia, being such a large economy and important in the electrification, clean energy tech, electric vehicles, might be a logical choice.
One reason for joining the BRICS is gaining access to the bloc's new development bank. Since its founding in 2014, the bank has approved more than $30 billion in loans for development and infrastructure projects.
Access to funding from this bank, which seem to be having more favorable terms than a traditional development bank like the World Bank or the IMF, is definitely something that's attractive to a lot of countries.
The new development bank also wants to deepen the use of local currencies instead of the US dollar for trade and financing between the BRICS nations. Ultimately, experts say one of the biggest challenges for the BRICS to counter the West is to form a united voice on major global issues.
Generally, the countries have pretty diverse and diverging interests in politics, on security issues, and even relations with the US. I think the group would like to be seen as an alternative political forum to the G7 group of developed nations. Whether or not it is able to achieve that, I think, will largely depend on what countries it admits.
Executive Order 13912, March 27th, 2020. Donald Trump federalizes the National Guard and reserves to active duty because of those unaddressed national emergencies. From 2017 to March 2020, Donald Trump declared 9 national emergencies. 7 were in executive orders, all were unaddressed by Congress. This equals a military operation, a continuation of government, a destroying of the federal corporation.
The 6-blade knife, do anything for you.
Executive Order 13919, April 30th, 2020.
Anything you wanna do.
President Trump signed Executive Order 13919, which gives the Secretary of Defense the authority to activate the reserve components of the military to federal duty. The military generals and their commanders, and Commander-in-Chief Trump, are now in full control of our nation and have been under multiple clauses under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the Constitution, and federal law. All this implicates that Joe Biden is not the president.